to be something different, it sounds to me, again, in the very near future. So is there a reason why we're doing this today and not doing it a month from now or 6 weeks from now?
Yeah.
I think the issue is parking.
Yeah, well, we have to show the parking rates today based on what we're adding. The question came up on the 100,000 square feet approximately of space that's not in use in the lower level. And I'm just sharing that our plans are actually not only not to use it to increase our parking load, but that would actually add additional parking spaces. So I'm just trying to put Jen a little bit at ease that there would be a swing. If you take 60,000 feet out, that reduces your potential 400 additional quote-unquote parking spaces by close to 200 and something, and adding another 78, and then you're almost right back to where we have. I'm just trying to say that what our lawyer says, and I apologize with him for using the word interrupted. That'd be nice.
It wasn't it was the demeanor.
I'm sorry, you know I love everybody here.
The fact is that that is not in play today, and if we wanted to put that in as additional use, we would have to come back and justify the parking at that time. So that's the only point we're making. We have no plans to use it now. The odds are that it's, like we said, it's not going to be added as additional parking requirements. And if it does, we have to come back in front of this board and justify it at that time.
I find, Jen, just let me, before we understand the continue. The way it stands today, with the proposed 200 rooms, do they have enough parking?
I think they may need a technical variance for not having that parking per our ordinance. The exact number I'm still working on here.
So, from the applicant's standpoint, based upon the known uses and ability to use the portions of the building, and based upon the same way we did the calculations on the original application, our conclusion and opinion is that with shared parking, we have more than adequate parking on this site. We have a total of 4,329 spaces, which is inclusive of the 6 charging stations and the 87 ADA spaces, while our demand is conservatively estimated to be 4214. In my opinion, we're very, very comfortable. In my opinion, we have more than enough parking on this site based upon the shared parking analysis.
You told me, when I mentioned the 4214, you told me those numbers have changed. Now you just threw them right back at me. So did they change or not?
The total.
The amended site plan is 42 parking spaces.
That's the total required, is the
Right.
4214.
So that's,
The total provided is 4329. So that's where the change was. We adjusted it to reflect the ADA spaces
Okay.
and the 6
I got you.
electric vehicles. So the
All right.
supply changed a little bit from that standpoint.
Excuse me, if you were to add any parking lot, for whatever reason, where would you do it?
Well, as was just discussed, is the potential to add spaces under the building for executive parking. So that's one option. Other options might be out in the roof in the egg or something of that nature. We don't think we need to add those, but there are areas where we can consider an open discussion. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to point out that we kept a lot of space vacant because of the potential parking issues down the road, and we have approximately 100 acres untouched, of which about 50 or 60 are uplands, and there's actual parking lots there today. And Carl, if you could touch on the fact that a lot of the parking is parking, and it's for those 2 days a year when we struggle with it, and we have so much space. It's not like we're landlocked and we're going to spill out onto the highway. We have so much space available for expansion.
Jen, Bonnie, do you need more time to review the work that you received today?
You probably should get the number correct before we get to, finishing this application so that we don't mess up here, but I guess we can continue on the rest of the testimony.
And then before we go to the investment, it just seems to me 6 charging stations for this many spots seems like a very low number, this many tenants. What is the requirement, or are there any requirements?
They're not required at all by our ordinance. They basically, you know, in actuality, they replaced 6 of the parking spaces.
Anything else? Yeah, they're trying to get reference that they can.
Oh, so I think what I was trying to get at is, I mean, I think we all recognize that the shared arrangement is there to try to avoid having to add more parking. But I think the condition in the original resolution was that if in fact it ever gets to a point where the occupancy requires more parking, we're gonna come back in front of you, and we're gonna work together to come up with the appropriate location to add the more parking. We're hopeful, we don't think, based on our expert, the shared arrangement should work, and we should be fine. But the good news is there's plenty of land around here that we come back and work together with you to come up with some adjacent employee parking, whatever we would come up with, so that we can have people parking in parking areas and not on the grass. So, Carl, I don't know if you finished or you still got more to go.
There were 2 things we wanted to note, so that, and we'll clean it up on the site plan. As some of the leases have been executed, there has been an agreement with the various tenants for some executive parking spaces to be demarcated for those leases. So it's about 195 spaces, which we will show on the site plan as a condition of approval, that are assigned to specific tenants. It's about 4.5% of the total supply. And the other aspect that we wanted to make aware of the board, so that it can be incorporated in a site plan approval, and when T&M's out there observing construction, we don't have an issue, is that to support the retail library uses, which have sort of a short-term parking demand and turnover to it, so you want a convenience with regard to the building. We are also proposing to manage the parking supply by taking about 100 spaces on each side of the building in closer proximity and designating those as a short turnover customer parking. And we'll have to work
Library
and the retail, that short turnover, so that those spaces are closer. The 200 spaces doesn't affect, and the 195 spaces doesn't affect the shared parking concept for 2 reasons. One, with regard to the 200 spaces for the short-term retail, that's just about equivalent to what the peak demand is in the afternoon hour for the retail. So that area will be turning over, and is about equivalent to that shared parking demand element of a piece of the total parking demand at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on an afternoon and a weekday. And then the same thing is true of the executive parking spaces. You would expect that they would be full basically during those times, you know, with the exception of whoever's at meetings, but it's a small component. The point here is there is a management that's going to be continuing as the tenancies come on board, the retail comes alive, that the owner will need to continue to do to manage its parking, evaluate it, reflect it. We may have to adjust that as it goes forward. Some of those executive spaces ultimately will go away if we're successful in doing the under-building parking that was just discussed. So there's going to be a little bit of dynamic management as we move through the full reoccupancy of this building. But at the end of the day, my evaluation and my understanding of the current uses and tenancies of this building is that we have a sufficient overall supply for the facility, and we should be able to successfully manage it as we move forward. But we wanted to make sure that when we submit the final site plan, we are demarcating the spaces and to the satisfaction of T&M.
Carl, if you're looking at it, it could be less, right? You've allocated 220 spaces. Why is there 20 more than approved? Is that?
That's a typical, the 1.1 is a typical standard. Generally what you see.
I'm saying there's 20 days you pick up.
Yeah, it's actually a peak supply. Usually what you'll see as parking ordinance standards for hotels is either the 1.1 per room, or a lot of times you'll see 1 per room plus one per employee. So it's sort of getting to the same location, by a different method.
Okay, thank you.
And Ralph just reminded me that they are starting to shuttle to the train station soon, so that will avoid some cars. And there's going to be probably, in all likelihood, a valet system for the hotel. So that would alleviate some of those more popular spots. So I think what I was trying to say, and maybe I didn't do a good job saying, is that the original resolution and the redevelopment agreement contemplates that we're going to have to work together. In fact, there's a committee in the redevelopment agreement that we work together when these kind of things come up. So if we ever did have a problem, again, we don't anticipate it, we would work very closely with you to make sure that we found additional locations to put an appropriate additional parking area in. That's the intent, to work with you to.
So if you're going to continue to work together, when we asked earlier about restricting some of the use of the space, why couldn't we write something in and then revisit it as you're working together going forward?
Well, the deed restriction is really problematic. I mean, you're talking about taking away rights from the building. That would be
Some sort of condition.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the condition that we had was that if, in fact, your professionals see that we don't have adequate parking because of the use at the building at some point, that we would come back to you and we would work together to come up with additional parking areas.
I think the only concern that I would have with that is that we're not in the loop. So as you're applying and pulling building permits, there's no inventory that Bonnie can utilize to say, this is how many parking spaces are required based upon the tenants that are in that building. There's a disconnection between the building permits that are being pulled in the construction department and the planning board. So there has to be something that would enable us to track it. Because right now, I mean, I'm assuming that these square footages are existing, like what you have for existing, or is that what's available? Because, the initial program for the building is a little different from how the building is fitting out over time, right? There was an assisted living, there was an educational area, there were things that are not actually coming to fruition. So there has to be some mechanism that keeps the planning board, or, at least Bonnie's office, in the loop on how much square footage of this building is being used by what type of tenant, so she can keep a running tally on how the parking, because, we want to be ahead of the curve here. We don't want to wait and then say, okay, there's a problem after the fact, so that if there's an issue, she can address it right away.
Yeah, so we'd be happy to work out some kind of mechanism between us, the building department, and you guys, so that this doesn't fall through the cracks. I mean, be happy to work with your solicitor and come up with a condition of some nature that would make sure that concern is addressed. Because we're on the same, our interests are aligned. Obviously, we need parking for our people that come to the building. We got to have adequate spaces, and if that day ever came where it wasn't working, we would want to address it as you guys would.
But I think the concern is what you folks consider to be working or not working versus what we consider to be working or not working, maybe two separate things.
Yeah, I think we'll be more concerned about it, because our tenants would be screaming at us that they can't find a place to park, so.
But for the issue of the basement space, which generates 106,000 square feet, can we agree that, would you be willing to agree as a condition that if that ever gets leased, that you will come back, either seek Bonnie's approval administratively, if she has an issue, then you'll come back here to get the parking issue resolved? Not a deed restriction, but at least a condition.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure how else we can address the basement.
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem with that. I just want to be clear. The conference center is already in here. The only other, we have no plans at this point to put any office space, other than perhaps, the cleaning crew and what we showed on the hotel, which is already in the calcs there. So we're actually taking, Bonnie, to your point, we're taking some more space out, because we showed about 10,000 square feet of that 110,000 or 100 that's down to the NA. It's actually becoming support staff for the hotel, and it's in the hotel ordinance at the 1.1 requirement. So that's actually being diminished. The other uses that are down there are, as today, planned is the parking garage, as I mentioned, but it's not part of our application today. It's a big chunk of the space.
and we'll be back for that if and when it's ready.
And the other uses that are being there, which I believe do not increase the load, are stuff like data storage, physical storage of space, so we have
But
tenants
based
that
on
are
our
using.
definition, that's still parking requirement. I think we need a better breakdown of exactly what it is, so we can put parking requirements, so we have the exact number in the resolution, so that then, like Jen said, when an application comes in, the zoning officer can look at it and say, okay, all the uses in the building, here's the total required. This is what you got your variance for. The parking, you're not increasing that parking requirement by any. Right now, we got like a mishmash of what's the required parking.
I don't understand your point. If we're putting data storage for an existing tenant in the basement,
Right, so then,
It's
so then
still
to my
space for
point,
that tenant.
but correct, and it would be assessed as part of that tenant space, or, like we said, then you stipulate that there will be no, other than storage in the basement,
No people.
you know what I mean?
for
Right.
office. So if we were
So-
for office tenants, we would come to the board. That's what we could stipulate.
It's not just office tenants, there are parking requirements for more than just office. So if you
What-
put something else
for
down
what?
there,
For
every,
example?
healthcare,
Data
health
storage
club.
has a,
Why don't we go with what
Data
Counselor
storage
had
is-
said,
yeah.
which is if we do end up using that space, we'll come back and we'll talk and make sure we have adequate.
But I just don't want to get stuck in an unclear definition of using that space. Are you telling me that if I put, I mean, the space is there, it was in our calculations when we came here the first time, it's actually being used for less than we said originally?
We're
It's the
just
same-
basing this on what your professional provided to us that shows NA with no parking requirement associated with over 100,000 square foot in the basement. So we need information in order to have a resolution that accurately reflects the circumstances. So I understand, and I think that the board and the town has been more than accommodating with flexibility in order to maximize your
Agree.
leasable area in the building, but that's 100,000 square feet. It's not like it's 5,000 square feet. And it generates a 400 parking space requirement that's not factored in. So, which, even if you use the shared parking, which I agree should be factored in, you're still deficient. So the reality is, there's plenty of parking out there currently, but the ordinance requires parking per use. And you don't have a use identified, and it's 100,000 square feet. So either stipulate that nothing's gonna go down there, or we need more information on what could potentially go down there, or I'm gonna recommend that you use the worst case scenario for what could be down there and calculate a parking demand based on that and get a variance. So, like, we need to,
I like the last choice.
And Mike, does it make sense to, what else is said? If you want to come up with some kind of potential numbers for a potential use that you can actually put in writing, and so for the next year, the professional's going to associate some kind of parking numbers with the basement use, whatever you want to deem that to be for now. And if you want to ever change that in the future, obviously, then you have to come back. But does it make sense to associate some use with all that space, or no? Just
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
getting late, so I'm not sure how long we're gonna go anyway, so.
Well, I was concerned with the, if we could handle this in a resolution. I know maybe the board's not ready, but I was concerned that board configuration might change. We have only 6 members tonight. That's a lot of transcript and reading, and I was hoping to have action tonight, and we could defer this kind of stuff for the resolution at the next meeting.
Well, we could do it with the condition that there'll be no other use in the basement other than what's been identified.
Or if there is a use, we come back.
You come back.
That's the condition, yes.
If you wanna be that generic, that's fine.
Yeah,
I think we're okay with that.
If you wanna associate some
No, I
minimal
think,
uses.
I think we're okay if we
Well,
use
Marty,
the
I think the
basement.
problem is that I can't tell you definitively that they don't need relief.
Okay, that's right.
So that's the problem that I'm having, in that
If we do it,
I
let's
think
do
the
it
shared,
right.
right, I think the shared parking is absolutely legitimate, but it still would require, I think it would still require relief, but I don't know, because I don't have all the information.
So are you
And I
okay
can't-
with the condition that any use, if they come back? Or no, you need more information?
I think I need more information in
Fine,
order to be able to
okay,
say
that's
that.
the answer.
Well, why don't you just add, I mean, what is it, 10,000 square feet more of parking? Of
Well-
400 vehicles? I mean, you have 100 acres, why don't you just, some big plans that
We don't think we need it, and we don't want to add
We don't want to
impervious
add
coverage.
impervious coverage and everything if we don't need it, that's the whole idea.
I mean, I think two things.
Is this something you folks can speak with them about for us to then continue testimony so that the testimony will be in line with what relief is necessarily is needed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's gonna happen today, but, yeah.
It just seems to me we're kind of going in circles. You folks aren't certain as to what relief is necessarily required. You folks aren't certain what uses there may or may not be. Maybe a little bit more conversation between you folks and then continue with this.
Well, I think where we're gonna land is we don't have a program for down there yet. So we would ask for the variance with the condition that if we do anything down there, we'd have to come back and get it approved. So,
Okay, and you folks need, before we even get there, you folks need to know specifically what relief is, what relief would be necessary.
I don't know that they need relief or not. I don't have enough information to stipulate that they do or they don't. That's the concern that I have, because in the letter received today, it says not applicable. So it just was eliminated from the calculation. And, you know, that's not really how our ordinance works.
so what we would ask for is the relief that we need, whatever that might be. Because we don't have a program for down there, so we're just kind of going in a circular way here. We want the relief, and we would agree to the condition that if we do use that for something, then we got to come back. But,
Okay,
you
but
know,
a
to.
But Mike, how is he
Still-
supposed to write a resolution? What relief? How many spaces are you asking for relief, or you don't know? So, I mean, I could take worst case scenario, which is 1 for 150, and calculate however much,
Fine,
and then,
fine, we know it's a
Or we
big
could
distance.
do, Ralph, you sort of suggested data center support area is what that use would generally be.
Yeah.
So your ordinance is 1 per 1,500 square feet, which would be equivalent to 71 spaces for that basement
That's a
area.
different.
that's a data center, not a data storage. That's different.
Basically the same thing, that's what a data center is.
Like I said, it's 10 o'clock at night, we're going in circles, I
10
can't do
minutes.
this on the fly.
You know, 9 minutes. I mean, it's not gonna get done in any, so let's just keep going.
Right.
Let's get as much done as we can.
Right.
This is something you guys can do.
I just don't know how we're gonna work it out. We don't have a program downstairs. So I was gonna ask for the max, and if we do have a program, then we come back to you. So we know in all likelihood, we're gonna come back for the parking down there, once that's finalized. So we'll be back to you then. Maybe we'll have an update at that point. In the meantime, we'll ask for the relief with the condition that if we do something down there, we need to come back to you.
If you do it worst case, you're required about 8,000 parking spaces where you only have 4,000 round numbers.
Right, and that's the ludicrousy of of the exercise, right? Because we know that if we need more parking, we're coming back to you. We have the shared parking arrangement. So technically, you might need a variance for 8,000 spots, but
Where do we go from 400 to 8,000?
It's the atrium area that technically it should say, which is a 0.
Worst case.
Which applies
Right, it's
0.
just the vagueness of what we're looking at, that's where the number comes from.
I just want to be clear, because this is getting a little frustrating for us too. We're adding 200, all we're adding tonight in front of this board is we're adding 220, right? We're adding the hotel, that's all that's on the table. The atrium's on the table, nothing else is on the table. So we're adding 200, and how many spaces? If it's
220.
220 required,
Hotel.
220 spaces required, if we do 200 rooms, actually doing probably 186 rooms, which would be less than 200 spaces. So to hear talk about 8,000 spaces, we're going back to 2013, and that, I think, has been, we're way past that. So we're talking about a use tonight
Right,
that is
but
adding
that's what the worst case
200
number
parking
was.
spaces.
But at
That's
the
it.
same time, the building is being occupied differently than that stacking plan
That's
that
not
we
what's
had
here
here.
tonight. It's not what's here
But you're
tonight.
here for preliminary and final, amended preliminary and final site plan for the building. So you can't just separate out the pieces that you want. The building has been occupied differently than the stacking plan. And the stacking plan had different uses, educational uses, assisted living facility, different things that are not coming to fruition. So the parking at the time, and I'll take out the atrium, I'm not even worried about that. The parking was calculated based on a stacking plan that's not in the building now. And now you're back amending that approval. So therefore,
So you're reopening the whole thing?
we have the
You're
right to
reopening
look
the
and
whole
make
thing?
sure how it's been
No,
occupied.
no,
I'll let the
no.
board decide on this, I think that's.
We're not reopening the whole thing. That's not, that's not what she suggested.
I'll withdraw my application, we're gonna reopen the whole thing.
Don't do that. Don't reopen it. That's probably the last thing you want to do.
More time, that's all. They need more time. I think it's fair.
It's a valid concern, just being a board member, it is a valid concern, just due to the fact of different use of when it was approved back then, right? So that's what she's concerned with. So, and that's what we're concerned with, and that's what we're supposed to be concerned with, right?
We agree, I just don't think that an 8,000.
I'm not saying,
We're
we're
not
not saying
talking
that.
about
We're not saying, we're
I'm
not
not
saying
talking
that,
about
Ralph,
that.
Ralph,
I'm
not
talking
saying
about the
that.
106,000
Let's move on, let's
square feet in the
get,
basement.
we gotta move on here. So I don't think it's that. I don't think we're worried about 8,000, I don't think that's what we're concerned with now. We're concerned with what is gonna go in there and what parking spots are gonna be, and we don't want a problem. We don't wanna have to come back and say, well, now we gotta go and use another part of land, now we gotta put more parking in.
The only open question is how to handle in my parking table that 106,000.
Correct.
Everything else is correct and accurate based upon the most current
There you go.
knowledge.
Okay.
of the business.
Right, so the other square footage
So
in there.
we'll work out how we're gonna testify to this board at the next meeting with regard to that 106,000. Put a little definition to it,
Great,
and
great.
we'll wrap that
I'm
up.
sure we can work it out.
That's all you need.
So, is that something we can take action on this
Let's not everybody
application
carried away
and
with
deal
this.
with that issue at the next meeting?
I'm sorry, Mike.
Is there a way we can take action this evening and deal with that issue at the next meeting as part of the resolution?
I don't know, we got
I mean,
5 minutes.
I'm concerned, Mayor, you're leaving. I mean, we're gonna have a different board and,
That's the only one that's leaving, me,
but
as far as I know.
we only have 6 tonight, so, you know, the quorum issue, it's gonna be an issue. We're gonna have to represent the whole application because the people that are gonna be new to the board are gonna wanna hear what they're voting on.
I don't understand.
No, they're gonna have to catch up, and they're gonna have to just
But
do
we
it.
still have to also open it to the public for questions and comments, and typically we end at 10, so I think what the deputy mayor is saying is, he doesn't see this ending tonight.
When is the next meeting?
What did we say, the,
Gotta wait to reorder.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would be January 30, but I can't say that.
January what?
30.
30?
Yeah.
Well, we'll need a date to carry them.
Well,
So you're gonna have to come up with a date, even if it
Can we
changes.
just
we'll have
carry it to
take those.
reorg for scheduling purposes only?
Yeah, or just use the 30th, and if that changes, we put a notice on the door, whatever the new date is.
if you want to carry it
We
to
gotta give a date, either
the
reorg
9th.
or some other date.
The 9th is probably reorg, but I can't do anything until I hear from
Oh, the
Maureen.
9th is real to this board?
I don't know. I can't
Oh.
do it till I know what the township's doing.
We need a date.
While they're discussing the date, I just have a question for Langdon that I should have asked before. Regarding the sanitary flow, where are you guys? There you are. You'll be using less than anticipated, correct?
Yeah,
Please tell me that's correct.
total is going down from what was approved.
Yeah, okay, so it's going to 150 from 212. So down 2,900 gallons.
And if you adjust up to 200, it's still below, still negative.
Well, look, so to make sure. So that's the only outstanding piece we have is the park. Everything else is okay with this?
Well, the first thing is that, Bonnie, right, to be fair, the 30th, is that the date we're gonna, that you came up with?
It's the only date that sort of makes sense based on the information I have at this point.
So, yeah, we want to open the public, right, so we can know if the witnesses on track, except for maybe Carl.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of testimony, for now, we're done with the testimony. Anyone from the public have any questions? Why don't you come forward, state your name and address for us.
Scott Goldstein, 24 East Lawn Drive. My question is regarding the glass windows on the new addition. You specified that it had the same tint as the existing atrium. What I was concerned about was the transparency, whether there was going to be any difference in shading or sunscreen, because being a resident, you know, when you go by the building at night, we don't see any light emanating out from the building. And I was concerned because those are hotel rooms that we now have this beautiful banner of light emanating from the hotel rooms there. And it just changes our community.
Good question.
Well, the glass that, we can provide information on the glass that was approved by the National Park Service. It's not, I believe that it has a slight tint, but it's not tinted so dark that if the rooms are illuminated at night, you will see a glow. Naturally, there will be window treatments, curtains, and shades, but that's something that cannot be mandated to close, but
Yeah, I would just tell you, drive by now, and there actually is light from the top end as well. And
because of the atrium.
Because of the atrium, and there's actually uplights on that facade. You walk in the building at night and you look up, it glows. There's actually uplighting over there. So I'm not an expert, but I don't think you'll see much of a difference. The other thing I would tell you is there's not a lot of light until recently, but go by now, and at night the building is pretty well lit up already. Because as the tenants come on and the lights come back on, it's, you know, I don't want to make you feel bad, but there is a lot of light coming, and there's a lot more light that's going to be coming as more tenants come on, and they tend to work, especially in the winter hours, you'll notice it. So the place is pretty well lit up already. And I don't think that this band of light is going to make any real significant change, because there's so much light already added. We even upped the lighting in the parking based on safety requirements. There's a lot more light now than there was 5 years ago when the building was vacant. As the building gets occupied, it's going to get quite a bit more, and there is light already coming out of that skylight anyway.
The testimony is that the windows will be tinted with internal light. Am I correct?
A certain percentage tinted, yeah. And there will be curtains as well, because people want to close them. You may actually have less.
That was an excellent question.
Question.
Got me for a minute.
Any other questions from the public? No. Any comments from the public? No. We go ahead and close questions and comments. All right, so we're going to go ahead then, Bonnie. I guess the next date, it appears, will be January 30th.
Yes.
Without further notice.
Without further notice.
And just to clarify, so the only item on the table for the January 30th meeting is this parking piece. Everything else is done, correct? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you think, go ahead, Bonnie.
Is this something the board might want to consider having Marty start to prepare a draft resolution in advance?
Yeah, you can see that.
So we'd have the potential to fill in the blanks, and then if you
If-
approve the application, we can take action on the resolution the
If all
same
the
night.
qualifications are met, then you just can't.
So you're authorizing Marty to start to prepare an approving resolution based on
Correct.
the next meeting?
Based on these, right, the results of next meeting. Again, you can always rip it up and throw it away. You know, doesn't it? So the only question that we have is
Bring Carl.
Paul.
Okay. Get a vote for that, or?
No. Motion adjourned.